Have you ever felt that the more available you are, the more invisible you become? It's as if, in the effort to always be present, your soul cries out for recognition, but in return, there is only emptiness. That silence is not light. It weighs. It weighs on the body, on the breath, on the heart. And over time, what began as a gesture of care slowly transforms into a secret wound, difficult to name, but impossible to ignore. Being constantly accessible may seem generous. It may even look like love, but it often grows out of a hidden fear. The fear of being abandoned, the fear of not being enough, the fear of not being remembered. To escape that fear, you give without pause. You abandon your boundaries. You offer more than you can. But that excess does not create closeness. On the contrary, it is precisely what dilutes your strength, your presence, your magnetism. This is what we are going to explore today in Stop Being Available and Become Magnetic Instantly. Because magnetism is not born from constant presence. True magnetism awakens when your energy stops being automatic and becomes intentional. It arises when you choose, when you retreat, when you allow yourself to be whole in silence, instead of scattering yourself in excess. Neville Goddard reminded us that imagination is the true creative center of life. When all our power is thrown outward, seeking attention, we forget the inner temple where reality is silently shaped. Greg Braden, in speaking of the unified field, shows us that it is not the visible gesture that creates attraction, but the silent frequency we carry within. Excessive availability does not vibrate as love. It vibrates as lack. And the field, sensitive and precise, responds exactly to that emptiness. Think of a spring that never allows itself to refill, always pouring out, always giving. Over time, it ceases to be abundant and deep, becoming nothing more than a shallow trickle of water. That is what happens to those who are always accessible. In the eyes of the world, their strength seems to fade, because there is no longer depth, no longer mystery, no longer magnetism. This video is an invitation to recognize this paradox and walk through it with awareness. An invitation to understand that magnetism does not blossom in over-availability, but in selective presence. It does not reveal itself in the effort to always be present, but in the courage to remain silent, to step back when necessary, to preserve your center. Because it is not the always available that attracts, but the energy that knows when to remain and when to retreat. We often believe that giving more than we have is proof of love. That being constantly accessible is the same as kindness. But silently, what often moves that gesture is a hidden desire to buy affection, to guarantee presence, to avoid being forgotten. There is a fine line between generosity that nourishes and generosity that consumes. And when that line is crossed, the light that was meant to shine begins to fade. The heart, moved by the best intentions, confuses the absence of boundaries with unconditional love, as if to love meant to never preserve oneself. But love that never knows boundaries is not love. It is dilution. Slowly, identity dissolves. The body grows weary. The soul gets lost in the excess of giving. And each gesture becomes less a gift and more a silent plea to be seen. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is constantly searching for small doses of instant pleasure. Each time we respond too quickly, each time we offer ourselves before we are even asked, the brain releases a little dopamine. This cycle creates dependency, and like any addiction, the satisfaction is short-lived, but the need to repeat it only grows. In this way, over-availability becomes a habit that drains us without ever truly filling us. I recall a story that repeats itself in many lives. Someone who believed their greatest virtue was to always be ready, always open, always present. Until one day, they realized that the more they gave, the less they were seen. It was only when they learned to say no that something changed. And that no was not rejection, it was self-care. In that moment, their presence regained depth, their energy regained value, and their magnetism quietly returned. The invisible mistake lies in believing that giving too much makes us indispensable, when in truth, excess only makes us predictable, and it is predictability that extinguishes the light. For the heart to be full, it needs pause, it needs rhythm, it needs space. And it is within that space that magnetism begins to breathe again. There is a silent force in emptiness, a presence that is not revealed in excess, but in the space created when we step back. It may be hard to accept, but often it is absence, not constant presence, that awakens interest. When we offer ourselves without pause, our energy loses weight, loses mystery, loses magnetism. But when we learn to stop, to create intervals, silence begins to speak louder than words. Neville Goddard taught that inner silence is creative. There are moments when not acting holds more power than acting desperately. Within the quiet imagination, reality takes shape. In the space between one gesture and another, the invisible field begins to arrange encounters. And paradoxically, it is in absence that presence is reborn stronger, truer, more magnetic. The quantum field, as consciousness researchers describe it, responds with precision to the vibrational state we carry. When we try to control, to please, to insist, desire slips away, always just out of reach. But when we release, when we retreat, when we stop offering ourselves excessively, energy reorganizes and life begins to move toward us. Think of the moon. It does not shine in the same rhythm every night. It appears, disappears, hides, and then returns. And it is precisely for this reason that we are fascinated. The beauty of the moon is not in its constancy, but in the mystery of its dance between light and shadow. Human energy is the same. When we learn to withdraw, our presence becomes rare, valuable, irresistible. This withdrawal is not rejection. It is nourishment. It is the pause that restores depth to the spirit. It is the space that strengthens vibration. Absence, when born from a place of awareness, does not push away. It attracts. It restores depth to the gaze, value to the gesture, magnetism to presence. And within this paradox, emptiness reveals itself as the great secret of attraction. Many hearts carry a silent expectation, the belief that by always being present, they will naturally be repaid, as if the constancy of care were, in itself, a guarantee of return. But life rarely responds this way. What seems like unconditional love can quietly become an invisible currency of exchange, a giving that, at its core, is waiting to receive. This myth of automatic reciprocity is born from an ancient belief. If I never fail, if I always give, one day I will be remembered, chosen, loved in equal measure. Yet reality shows another face. Reciprocity does not blossom from constant presence, but from perceived rarity. What is rare awakens attention. What is overabundant becomes ordinary, almost unseen. The science of the body also speaks of this. Bruce Lipton, in his work on epigenetics, shows how beliefs and emotions shape our very biology. Those who carry within themselves the idea that they do not deserve fullness tend to accept less, to settle for emotional crumbs, and the body, obedient, responds. The cells adjust to this vibration, silently confirming what the mind believes. Many live this cycle without even realizing it. They give more, expect more, receive less, and when reciprocity does not come, they feel empty, as if they had failed. But it is not failure. It is only the reflection of an inner imbalance. As long as the belief in unworthiness remains, the cycle will continue. The path begins when this belief is brought into awareness. When we dare to ask, which part of me still accepts less than I deserve? Which part of me still believes I am not worthy of emotional abundance? This question is not an accusation, it is a mirror. And in front of that mirror, the soul can begin to free itself. The myth of automatic reciprocity falls apart when we realize that true love is never a bargain. That attraction is not born from insistence, but from the vibration we choose to dwell in. And that, in truth, it is not the amount of energy we give that sustains a bond, but the state of wholeness we carry within us. Magnetism cannot be measured by how often you appear, but by the vibrational quality that accompanies your presence. To be everywhere, for everyone, at all times, is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of dispersion. True power emerges when you choose, when you understand that not every space deserves your energy, not every situation deserves your presence. Neville Goddard said, You are always chosen by the state you occupy. It is not about the person in front of you, but about the inner state you live in. That state determines what you attract, what you repel, what stays in your life. When your mind and heart are aligned in a quiet state of abundance, you no longer need to chase anything. It is the state itself that chooses for you. Before giving your energy, there is a simple question that can transform everything. Does this expand me, or does it contract me? The answer does not lie in logic, but in sensation. If the body opens, there is flow. If the body closes, there is depletion. This awareness is a vibrational triage, a sacred filter that protects your inner flame from being extinguished by winds unworthy of your breath. The image is clear. A lit candle must be protected. Exposed to any wind, it is extinguished. The same is true of the energy of the soul. Being selective does not mean rejecting the world. It means honoring the flame that burns within you. It is this preserved flame that illuminates, warms, and magnetizes. When you begin to choose what is worthy of your energy, you stop losing yourself in presences that give nothing back. Your absence becomes strength. Your presence becomes rare. And in that rarity, magnetism is revealed, profound and undeniable. True magnetism is not about attracting everyone. It manifests when you become whole enough to repel what does not resonate. Many of us confuse magnetism with universal approval, as if the goal were to please everyone around us. But that illusion only brings exhaustion. Authentic magnetism is born from the coherence between what you are and what you vibrate. It does not seek acceptance, because it already carries within itself its own validation. The great saboteur of this state is the anxiety for approval. The mind runs after recognition, begging for external signs of worth, while the heart asks only for silence and coherence. This conflict creates noise, an unstable energy that repels rather than attracts. But when mind and heart align, something shifts. A natural serenity arises, a presence that no longer needs to prove anything, because it is already enough. There is a way to enter this state, to feel your body as if it were already wrapped in an aura of natural attraction. A magnetic presence that requires no effort, it simply reveals itself, as if the skin itself were breathing a quiet radiance, as if every cell remembered its intrinsic worth. In this state, you no longer ask to be seen, you simply shine. The image of the magnet perfectly explains this mystery. The magnet does not chase after the metal. It does not rush. It does not force. It does not over-offer itself. It remains whole in its center. And precisely by remaining whole, it inevitably draws to itself what belongs to it. The same is true of the human being. When you remain faithful to your center, you become magnetic by nature, without effort, without pursuit, without haste. The awakening of true magnetism happens when we stop chasing and learn to remain. When we understand that being magnetic is not about attracting everyone, but about allowing only what resonates to approach. It is in this inner rest, in this silent state of coherence, that true attraction takes place. Excessive availability is a mask of lack. It is born from the fear of not being remembered, of not being loved, of not being enough. But when you offer yourself without pause, you dilute your energy, lose depth, and weaken the very light that was meant to shine. True magnetism does not arise from constant effort. It awakens when you withdraw, when your presence stops being automatic and becomes a conscious choice. Neville Goddard reminds us, the secret is not the desire, but the state assumed as true. Magnetism is not asking, but radiating. It is not seeking approval, but inhabiting an inner state of wholeness that naturally attracts. Joe Dispenza confirms that when mind and heart vibrate in the same frequency, the magnetic field becomes unshakable and attraction happens effortlessly. The benefit of this path is profound. You stop chasing and begin to rest within yourself. You stop being predictable and become rare. You stop begging for attention and begin to radiate presence. This is the power of selectivity, transforming absence into strength, silence into depth, presence into authentic magnetism. And perhaps the question that remains in your heart is this: what in your life needs your absence so that your magnetism can be reborn? If this reflection touched you, Share in the comments a simple phrase, "I choose to preserve my energy." Let us see how many here are ready to make this transition. Continue watching our videos to remain in this space of silence, healing, and awakening, where every word is a reminder that you are not alone and that your presence carries value.